Okay, so now the little Ernst things are put together here, and you can see the little flap opens up, and I can take a servo wire and plug it in and remove it. And it's just a nice sturdy attachment point that once I put a Velcro strap on the cabane, you don't have to worry about this too much. So that'll be nice. But while I'm still waiting for glue to dry on the exhaust, I'll go ahead and continue with this. I want to get the smart fly installed, seeing as how we're starting to get all of our servo wires showing up here. Start planning out how we're going to route that. The thing I like about smart fly is that it's really easy to install. It's just really as simple as installing a servo. You just need a couple of hardwood blocks that I just cut to the same width, and I'm just going to CA those down into the bottom here, and then use my pin vise finger drill to do my pilot holes, do the CA and screws. So let me get this installed, and this will just go right here. When you're looking at a place to mount it, look for something that has some good structure. It just so happens that the size of the smart fly fits perfectly right here with the webbing right here and right here. So let me get those CA'd down, and we'll be back in a moment. So while we're still waiting for glue to dry, I figured I'd go ahead and install the elevator servo extensions. You can't see it in the picture here, but I have the smart fly mounted down here. I wanted to show what I'm doing here. I have my two strands, which are plenty long enough, so that gives me room to route it around out of the way. I'm going to take one on one side and one on the other and feed it in from the back. What's nice about this airplane, and if you're building a big one such as myself, it is nice that you can just stick your arm back down in there. On smaller models, you might want to get a string with a fishing weight on it, or I don't know, an old pull cable from one of your old Rudder setups. And it's just that simple to pull it through. Later, I'm going to zip tie this off and pull it out of the way. I'm not sure if I want to have my rudder servo mounted in the rear or in the tray yet. I haven't installed it yet because I wanted to get as much stuff as I can on the plane and do a rough CG check based on where weight needs to go. Will tell me if I can move the rudder servo all the way to the back, and then I'll just use a direct linkage. If not, then I'll mount it up here. Traditional pull applies. Or once I get that figured out, I have a conduit tubing here that'll look really cool going along the inside of the fuse. I'll just zip tie it up. So let me go ahead and set up the next little bit. Next we'll be pulling the landing gear off and preparing the underneath of the plane so that we can finally treat the firewall and get this thing really start building. Right now it's all the test fit and preparation. It's just a lot of work to mark everything and get it installed how you want it. So let me pull the engine and mufflers out and get the landing gear off and on the other table where I can have it rolled up so you can see what I'm doing on the bottom. Okay, so here we are all set up on the other workbench. I took the landing gear off, like I said in the last part. And the next time the landing gear and engine and everything goes on here will be the last time it goes on here, hopefully. What I'm doing is taking thin sheets of balsa and cutting them out so that I can glue them in to seal off the canister tunnel. We don't want any of the heat from the exhaust or the engine getting into the engine bay. We want to create a flow of cooling. So I've opened up the bottom here so I can access this. Well, I'm going to install the balsa panels, and then later on I'll make louvers for the air to exit out. But while it's at this stage, we'll get the panels in there. I'm going to go ahead and take this off and paint it with an enamel-based paint that'll seal it from the oil and fuel coming in from the engine, and it'll look really nice, trust me. So let me get the panels in and get it taped off and sprayed. I'll probably have to pick this up back in the morning, let the paint sit overnight, but we'll check it out, and it should look good. Tried. And I've gone ahead and installed the throttle servo in its location and just ran the wire back to where the smart fly is for now. I'll worry about tidying it up a little bit later, but I wanted to get it in position so I could put a little bit of CA on the back of the screws, make sure that the servo screws don't back out through the plywood. So I've also attached the throttle linkage to the carburetor so that when I put it up against the firewall, the push throttle goes straight through the hole that I made for it to go through, and all I have to do is attach the servo horn to the servo that I left disconnected here. Before we put the engine on though, I wanted to get the plug wires secured back against the firewall so that they're not rubbing up against the engine. And before I installed the ignition module, I wanted to go over the optical ignition kill. Oh, excuse me. Now I'm using one from EDR. I've used it in a few planes and it's been very good for me. The SmartFly EQ6 has the option to have the optical kill, but since I already had one of these in the shop, I saved a little money and didn't get that one. It's not to say that it's not good. SmartFly makes great products. But if we follow this, for the electrical diagram, you have the battery that goes into the switch, that we're also going to have an ignition regulator here because we're using lithium-ion batteries, and we want to step that down to 5.2 volts. So I'm using the SmartFly ignition regulator. That goes into the optical kill switch, and then the output of that goes into the ignition. So to show that, I wanted to put it all together and make it a nice easy chain instead of a confusing diagram. Some people understand it better if they just see it. So what I have here is I have the ignition set up ready to go, and if you follow the wires, this is where the signal goes up from the crankshaft and tells it when to fire. This is where the power comes in into the optical switch. This lead that's dangling here is for the LED that I installed already, and the other side out the cable goes right here, and then this comes down to the ignition regulator from SmartFly. It's nice, compact, lightweight, and then this will go to the switch, and then from the other side of the switch goes to the battery. So as you can see, that the wiring diagram really isn't that confusing. It's one long chain. Like I said before, I wanted to get the ignition module mounted first before I got the engine installed. So I want to get my zip ties ready. tuck that right inside the firewall here. And let me move this over a little bit. As you can see here, I have the ignition module hanging right off the side with the zip ties crisscrossed. One going top to bottom, one going front to back. And that holds it nice and secure. You want a little bit of, I'll tighten those up a little bit more, but you don't want to completely crush the foam rubber, because part of the goal here is to absorb some of the vibration from the engine. Next, I want to finish tightening this up. So let me finish putting the screws in and mount the engine. This time, I'm going to use the same T-nuts that I've been using, but I'll put them in so that they go up against the wood. And once the bolt and the T-nut are tight, I'm going to put a lock nut on it to make sure that the bolt doesn't come loose. We don't want the engine coming off the firewall. So I'll come back once the engine's mounted. Whoa, wait a second. Did I miss a step? No, you didn't. I left you with putting the engine on, and that's what I went ahead and did. I told you I was mounting the ignition first, and then I bolted up the engine and installed my exhaust. And I'll come back and show a couple of the tidbits that I did. I went ahead and plumbed out the engine and just left the hoses free on the inside to put together. But when I put it all together, I was like, wow. So I had to end the video on a high note. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this batch of footage, and the next batch will be installing the smoke pump. I just made a little bracket out of some balsa and a couple of the strips used for the stringers. So it's got some rigidity, a little bit of Velcro, all good to go. And then I'm also going to mount the ignition stuff, and I'll show that. So I guess I'll see you all tomorrow or in the next chapter.